Huh? Huh? Yeah.
Go forth and spread the good news of the gospel. That was the whole commandment that Jesus gave, was to go forth and witness to all those. And if we're living in the last days, as was prophesied about, then these are critical times, hard to deal with. This is the message that you need to be promoting. This is what your life work should be, is doing God's work, not your work.
So why did you stop promoting that message? What changed for you?
I used to go to work and I used to preach to everybody, right? I used to be preaching to folks every chance I get. And I came across a guy that was like a card-carrying atheist dude. This guy was a super-duper atheist extraordinaire, man. This guy could debunk anything like religions. He knew all about religions and stuff like that. And we started talking, and the guy was making so much sense, man. Every argument I tried to put off on this guy, he would just counter me with just logical questions, just epistemology. He was just doing street epistemology before it was a thing, and doing it well.
You've never been met with that before.
Never. All I've ever talked to was other religious people. And so it was like the Bible was our weapon. But this guy couldn't use the Bible because he just knew how to deflect all that and just ask me key questions, very simple questions that I couldn't really answer. And I would go to elders and I would go to people, and they would try to tell me, well, you tell them this, you tell them that, and I go on to tell him these things, and he's like just making too much sense to me. And I'm like, wow, man, you got to answer for every damn thing, don't you? And he's like, yeah, you need to just think about your epistemology, man. Think about why you believe what you do. Because right now, if you can't explain to me why you think it's true, how do you explain it to yourself? And that stuck with me. I'm like, yeah, man, I can't really explain it to him. So what am I telling myself? Why am I not questioning it the same way? And he just got me thinking, and he gave me a book called Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And he said, read this novel, man. And after you read this novel, tell me if you're still a believer after all that. And I'm like, okay. And I read the book against what the elders told me. They're like, look, don't read anything the world has to offer you because it's just the devil, blah, blah, blah. But, I was thinking to myself, yeah, but if we have the truth can stand up against any rigorous questions. The truth can stand up to anything.
So did it?
And it did not at all. It just crumbled. My faith just went. And I talked to my wife about it, and she just didn't understand me, and we had problems. And that's really what dissolved that whole situation, because it was like, she lost a lot of respect for me,
Hmm. I think we share this similarly because what broke down mine was book 2. Mine was God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens. That was mine. And I told this before, it took years for me to actually crack this book open and actually read it. I was assigned jury duty for the first time. It was like maybe roughly 3-4 years ago, around the time that I finally deconverted. And for years, I've been questioning, several years. So I was that deconstruction process, like back and forth, a literal roller coaster. Just the up and down phases of my life. And years prior to that, me going into jury duty, I had a friend that gave me this book by Christopher Hitchens. And around that time, I kind of questioned, and he was an atheist, and so I often asked him questions, but I was still a believer. But I wasn't really sure. I was just, whatever. I guess it doesn't really matter, but I still believe in God and whatever. So I guess that's okay. And he gave it to me. I never read it. I always held it in the back of the trunk of my car for years. Like, I don't know how long. It just stayed there. Never opened it. And then finally had jury duty. My mother, as good as she is, instructed me. It's like, you're just going to sit there for a long time until they call your name. Might as well bring something to read. And I'm like, I don't have anything but like my school text because I was going to school too at the time. And I'm like, I don't want to read that. And so, sifting through my trunk of my car, I found that book miraculously. It was God sent. No.
It was God
sent. God telling me something. So I pull out the book, read the cover and everything. And I was like, okay. So I took it with me into the court area where it's like, a group conference area where you sat and had to wait for your name to be called and all that stuff. And I started reading it. And, I read, I shit you not, I think I would have read the full thing like twice. And because I got called to be on a juror, and it was a long case. I stayed on it for almost 2.5 weeks. And I read it. No, I did read it twice, and I was going to go through it again a third time. But just like certain sections that I really wanted to read over again. So I wasn't going to be like the full read all over. And by the end of that court case, I would say literally the following day, I was like, I don't think I believe anymore. Like this book made me really think. As much as I kept reading it and certain sections and scribbling in it and highlighting it, like I wrote all throughout that book. I could pull it out now, and I can just see my writing all over the place. Like, oh, that makes sense. Like, oh, I remember this part. Like, oh, he's talking about this scripture and that verse and all this. And I was just pouring out all this stuff as I was reading it, and I'm like, as much research as I did prior to that, as many documentaries, as many other videos I've listened to, podcasts, other texts I've read, this is the one that got me. This captured me. This clicked in my head like that. And I was like, wow, I'm an atheist.
Wow. I can believe it because Christopher Hitchens is a hell of a orator and writer. I mean,
Damn right.
He has some really good, and he attacks things on a moral point of view, and he attacks you at a very moral kind of level, not necessarily like a scientific level or anything like that, which I think is really powerful because I don't think that the science and all that kind of stuff like that were the reasons I got into it, or really the reasons you get out of it. I think it's more of how you think about yourself. Like, you always want to do the right thing, like however we define that as. And for me, it was like, I want to be an honest person, and I have to be honest to myself. And if something like this isn't making sense, especially something like Jehovah's Witness, where I presided over some cases where women's children were getting raped by elders in the church. They were like raping little kids, right, for example. And that was like one of the things that really sent me on my way out, was because of the way that whole situation was handled. It's like this lady, a friend of ours, and she had a daughter, and she wanted one of the elders to come babysit her daughter, and while she was working, and the elder said okay, and came over and raped the little girl. Man, the girl was only like 7 or 8. It's terrible, horrible. And once the lady found out, she went into a anxiety attack. Like, she went into an emotional breakdown, and she went and told the elders and told us, and we had to go and talk to the lady and stuff like that. And when she did it, she was so nervous, she started smoking a cigarette, and you can't smoke cigarettes when you're a witness, right? And so they disfellowshipped her. They like, you gotta go. You can't be doing this bullshit. You gotta get out of here. That shit. I don't give a fuck. They're like, I don't care what happened. That's unacceptable. And then kicked her out. And mainly, I think they did it because she was talking about she wanted to go to the police. And they were like, lady, if you go to the police, you're gonna make all of us look bad right now. You need to squash that. Like, you need to squash that. You ain't going to no police. We'll handle this. And smoking a cigarette, no, you're out. Kicked her out. The elder, they didn't kick him out. They just demoted him. They made him to where he lost his elders, being an elder. And it was like horrible for me. I like cried and just, went really, it was really sad. And I felt really guilty of being a part of that whole situation. And then it got to me thinking about all of that and reading the Ayn Rand book. It's like, if you have no stands within yourself, like if you cannot stand up to what you know is wrong because of what other people tell you, then you ain't really, you don't have any morality. You don't have anything. You're nobody. You've let somebody else be that backbone for you. You don't have a backbone. You're just nobody. And it just convicted me. And I was like, you know what? That's right. I need to be the one to go to the damn police. Somebody needs to say something, and it's one of those things where it's a hard life lesson that lets you know religion is bullshit. Religion will have you give up your whole moral compass, because it's not moral to just follow Hitler, into killing people and send them to the gulag. Like, this stuff really messed me up. And this is the things that I was trying to tell my ex-wife at the time. Like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is just not, it's not really me. If this is what God thinks is okay, then I don't even want to worship this thing. This thing is not worth worshiping anymore. And you can have at it. I'm done with it, And it was that kind of situations all the time. It wasn't an isolated case. It was, they would always hide this pedophilia and other things, as well, because there's a scripture where the Apostle Paul says, let us not take brother to court, Let us handle each affair among each other. We're brothers in the Church of Christ. And they took that shit literally, They wouldn't go to the authorities for that. And it's just, so many lives have been destroyed by that. And so I just couldn't do it, couldn't do it.
There are too many similar cases like that. It's too often people find themselves in those situations, and that's heavy. I mean, thankfully, I've never been a victim of, rape. I certainly have been assaulted, and, inappropriately touched, things like that, or comments inappropriately made towards me. But it's, and I apologize. I'm having a hard time even getting through that, because that, in addition to the ugly language surrounding homosexuality within the Black church itself, is foul, it's hateful, it's disgusting. And then on top of which, the things that happen behind closed doors to young children, to adult men and women, and they can't seek any refuge. Their only refuge, as they have been taught and told and guided towards, is their teachers, their preachers, their pastors, their guiders, their instructors within the church. And then they're threatened because of the harm that's done to them. That's how is that? I won't say fair, because obviously that's not fair. How is that moral? How is that right? And to go about your day-to-day life and live that way. And you yourself had a hard time. You were nowhere near that situation. The actual act or the situation involving the woman's child and the elder. But obviously you had to, in a sense, be over counsel for that, or?
Yeah. So, on my exit, I elaborated on that situation mainly. That was probably mainly my my story right there. Like when I left, I said, that situation really, I can't handle that. I just, it's not part of my values. It's not part of who I am as a person. And I can't imagine a loving God allowing that to happen. And they're like, well, the whole rebuttal was, well, no, God is not allowing any of that. God is not allowing that. The thing about it is, these things are part of this world. This is the world we live in, Scott. This is the evil world we live in. And we're not, even though we've committed ourselves to Jesus Christ and Jehovah God, that doesn't make us perfect human beings in any way, shape, or form. We're all, and he pointed to a situation in the Bible where Paul was like, I think he was counseling, which church was that? The Galatian church, I think it was. And he was saying, no, Ephesus, in Ephesians, where he was saying that there are some among you who act inappropriately towards your own daughters. So apparently there were brothers even in the first century church that were molesting little kids, their own daughters. And his advice was to remove that wicked man from among yourselves. That was where the whole disfellowshipping process got its root in the Jehovah's Witness beliefs. Like Paul said, remove the wickedness. That's what we did. We're removing the wickedness. I'm like, yeah, but she smoked a cigarette. Like, what about the guy that, like, you got it backwards? Like,
that is backwards. The guy only got a demotion.
And not only that, I said, we don't live in the fucking first century. Like, we live in the 20th century, guys. This is 1990, whatever. And it's like, this is what we have police for. This is what we have a judicial system for. Like, we're not riding around in buggy and horses, Like, come on, guys. We're not trying to live out some fantasy, At least I'm not. I'm not trying to live out some little old fantasy or vision of what life's supposed to be. Like, life is supposed to be justice if we can make it just. We're the ones that have to bring justice to each other. There's no God that's going to come down from heaven and do it for us.
Right. On that, no, because, okay, if God has placed us here and he has theoretically no dominion of earthly things, like what we do on earth is our own free will as we're granted, supposedly, because, the actions of that elder and any other person that does harm against children or other individuals, disgustingly, that is because of their free will, and because we're imperfect people. It's because God has no true dominion or control over the earth. So if that is the case, then that individual that just simply just got a demotion, aren't they now tagged to go to hell?
Yeah, they in the Jehovah Witness doctrine, what happens with such a person is before they die or before the end of the world comes, then justice is supposed to be handled through the congregation, which Jesus is supposed to be the head of the congregation, right? The elders are the head of each man, and the head of each man, or the head of each woman is the man or whatever. It is like a hierarchy, right? But until that person dies, they're not going to be judged by God. You have a chance in this life to turn it around. Doesn't matter what you do. You can be a murderer. You can be a rapist. If you just ask for Jesus' forgiveness, that's what Jesus was here for. Like, he's our mediator. He's supposed to be the one that pays the price.
Right. And that's
sins.
And that's the bullshit right there.
That's it.
That's the bullshit. Because you can do as much wrong as you want. Kill, rape, torture, whatever harmful thing you can do to anyone else. But yet you just turn the other cheek, pray to God, become saved, then you die. Boom, you're saved, you still go to heaven. What the fuck? How is that right? How is that justice? How is that any type of godly justice or whatever, however you want to label it? Does that really make any kind of fucking sense? That's absurd.
It's disgusting. It's disgusting, really. It's it's part of the reason that I had to get out, man. I was like, this is stupid because this guy can turn and say forgive, because really once you're baptized, I mean, what they teach you is that, the thing is, what Jesus did was enough. Like, there's no work you can do that's going to top what Jesus did for you. Like, there's no amount of avoiding the sins, whatever they are. There's no sin that's going to top what Jesus did for you. Like, you can go and you can rape as many kids as you want. What Jesus did for you overpowers that shit. And for us to think that we can work our way into heaven or we can kind of like become righteous enough, that isn't the point. The point is we need to believe. All they care about is belief. What do you believe? That's what makes you a good person, not what you do. Because even what you do is not good enough. It'll never top what Jesus did for you. And they're going to tell you, they're going to say you're a worm. They always tell us we're worms. Like, we're just garbage. Like, you're just garbage. I don't care if you go out and you're Mother Teresa and you feed the damn earth. You're garbage in the eyes of Jehovah. Towards Jehovah, he's so great and he's so glorified that you can't even look at him without burning up. Like, he is the light. He's the greatest light that ever came. And Jesus is the only next thing that represents anything close to that. So who are you to think that you, in all your self-righteousness, are going to say anything that I have done to work my way into it? It don't work that way to them. So they're like, so on the opposite spectrum, there's no sin that you can do that's going to erase what Jesus did for you. See, it works both ways. So it's like, all that matters, man, is that you believe and you put your faith on Jesus. That's all that matters.
Because that's the only way you're considered a good person. You use the ultimate scapegoat. Jesus sacrificing himself to himself for your sins. And anything that follows after that. I wonder, because, I see no clear difference as far as, the different denominations with Christianity. Everyone just has their slightly different changes as far as their walk with Christ or whatever. And And I could see how one would never go back to even just going back to Southern Baptist. Like, you saw the ugly in JW. Why not just go back to Southern Baptist? Because there's ugly there too. It's all the same shit, right? And I'm sure that's something your family even questioned about. And, you know, as hard fought as we are, because we both, you know, do content on various channels, and we both are, in a sense, our own advocates and advocates for the communities that we speak to and talk to and, you know, subscribe to and everything else. As fervent and outspoken we can be and are with believers that come to us with this ignorance, do you or have you ever been this fervent with your own family? Have you approached them with this stuff? You mentioned your ex-wife as far as your reasons of why leaving. I don't know if, for me, because as you know, and many others, I'm closeted, I don't know how fervent I would be about approaching them with this stuff. And I probably would get more or less the same responses as we pretty much addressed. But have you ever been that, you know, strong pointed with your family?
Not really, to be quite honest with you, because they didn't experience what I experienced, because they didn't really dive into it as hard as I did to even know what I'm talking about. Like, they don't even understand why I'm an atheist. They're like, just because witnesses did some fucked up shit, now you think God don't exist. Like, how are you going to mix those two things up? Like, we all, like, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness either, but I believe in God. Like, don't be stupid. Like, so you're going to let Jehovah's Witnesses screw you out of going to heaven? You know, it's like, come on now. But they don't understand it's deeper than that, because the other good thing that Jehovah's Witnesses had done is educate me on other religions, like the history of religion. Like, we had whole books on the history of religion that we taught in different book studies and things like that. And they made these doctrines that we know are false, that are nowhere in the Bible. They're all man-made religions. But if you go knock on doors and you talk to your neighbors about the Trinity, or you go talk to your neighbors about, you know, Christmas, or they think this shit's in the Bible, and we know it's not in the Bible. This is pagan stuff. This is where it started. They can point to all the history and the things that you learn, and you kind of feel special. It's kind of like, you know how you have those conspiracy theorists, you know, you have these conspiracy theorists that get into that shit because they feel they have this special knowledge no one has. So they're eager to tell you all about, oh, you think that what's going on politically means this. Actually, what's going on is the lizard people, or whatever the fuck. And so it's kind of the same way, you know, we learn accurate history, you know, at least. And so knowing all of that coming out of Jehovah's Witnesses, there was no way I would go into Christendom again or any of these other religions, because I had learned so much about their history at that point. So it was like, that's their way of teaching you, stay with us or stay with nobody, you know.
Do you have a strong desire to push your family out of faith? And I ask this because I recall having this conversation with a friend not too long ago where, you know, as I was saying, we're so hard fought in what we talk about and how we display ourselves and how we want to break down the bullshit arguments of Christianity, for example. But we never approach our own families that way. I never have had any desire, nor still have any desire, to approach my family that way. It's almost like we allow them that, I don't know, that cop out. I guess I don't want to label it that way, but for lack of a better word, I will. We allow that because, well, many reasons. I know for me, and we've kind of shared a little bit and via messages and everything some time ago, where you had asked me what type of any type of cognitive dissonance I had coming out of faith that I still currently hold. And kind of to expand upon my answer, which was my fear of harming my family. It's, not wanting to, even though I recognize myself as a Black sheep, not wanting to impose more harm on them due to trauma of losing my dad, trauma of them feeling like they're losing me, building upon their arguments of, oh, I've always been against the family because A, B, and C, them pressuring me into wanting to believe again various things. And, because of all those things, I have both a fear and a protection of myself to not reveal or remain closeted. And I know in your view, being more open and honest is, and for most people, not disappointingly you, being more open and honest and being your most authentic self is, the truest form of you being the most honest person. And, I wonder, in the most absolute honesty, approaching them in the way that we approach various people online, would that be the most honest approach?
It's really hard because at first, and see, I'm a very expressive person, like you say. I want to be genuine, and I like to be very honest and lay all my cards out on the table with folks, right? Like even strangers, people that I don't even need to do that to. And it used to be a big problem for me. Like I would just be too open, and much less with my family and people like that. I was just so willing to want to discuss it and want to convert them over to, or at least have them understand where I'm coming from for some reason. And then I started to really try to realize what's the psychology behind all that. Like, am I really, I feel like there's a neediness there, like that could be at play in me. Like, I don't want to be a needy person, but there's kind of like a need in me to want to be understood by the people that I love dearly, right? I just want them to know who I really am, and if they love me for who I really am, right? Like, and I realize that's kind of a neediness, and it's not really. It may not even be that healthy. It may be normal, but it may be something that I have to get over. So, and I have to look at it like, everyone has to go through this life and learn these things on their own. Like, I can't raise a grown person. I can't think that my situation is something that everyone has to follow behind. Like, who am I? I'm just me. I'm just doing me. I can't tell other people how they need to be doing their life either. And it would be unhealthy for me to even impose myself on them. And what kind of ego is that, or what's really going on with me? And so I kind of just came to a point where I just don't want to talk about it with them. Like, yeah, that's why I don't really bug you guys about this shit. Like, I don't really care to talk about it too much because it just creates a lot of strife over nothing, and and it's dumb.
All that you've experienced and been through and where you are now with music, with your prior faith, plural, with, how do you see yourself now? You, of course, are a mixed race man, but you've mentioned that you more heavily lean on identifying yourself as a white man instead of Black. What's your reasoning behind that?
Why would I identify as a white man? I would say that when asked, I would probably say I'm white because only because that's how people view me. Biologically, I am white. Like I'm probably 75% white and 25% Hawaiian. My mother is like 50% Hawaiian, right? In part Mexican and Hawaiian. So I'm mixed in that way. Black really isn't my biology or my blood. And then when people see me, they always assume, oh, he's the white dude or whatever. I notice a lot of people don't think that I'm all the way white. I don't know, man. Being something is like, what do we really mean? And are we being arbitrary? Like, at what point in the game am I saying that I'm identifying with? Because I mean, ultimately, we all come from Africa genetically. So in a sense, I could say but I wouldn't play that stupid game. But I'm just saying that with my heritage, I could say I'm Hawaiian. I could say I'm, white. I could say I'm black, because really my family I have a lot of family that's black, from, Africans from Kenya. I've got families that are African American from the South. Race is so weird for me to talk about race, because in a way it's kind of imaginary. It's an imaginary construct, like being black in America. What does that mean? Does that mean people that are light skinned are not black in America because their skin is lighter? No. I could never say like I know what it is to be black, because I really don't, because I'm not really a black person. But I do understand, because I have black family and I've seen it and I've been there with them through different situations. And when I'm talking to my children identify as black. My children are way darker than me. And I have to talk with them, when you're around police, you behave different. If you want to survive, you got to be this way, that way, or whatever. And I try to be a father to them, and I try to let them identify in any way they want. And I don't try to push any one culture above another. I just say, look, you have to identify with who you feel you are. As far as the race identity thing, I just don't. It can be a confusing thing sometimes, for me.